Hi there, this is Unmesh from PiXimperfect, and today we can learn how to perform a very simple photo manipulation and create this crazy composite in Photoshop. Right from selecting it, to placing it, to creating the shadow, to matching, we're gonna cover it all. It's gonna be a hell of a ride. So without any further ado, let's get started. So here we are in the mystical world of Photoshop, and if you want to go ahead and download this photo, check the links in the description. So the first thing that we have to do, key to compositing, creating the perfect selection. Alright, and we will do this in this image by using the pen tool. And how to use the pen tool, I have a dedicated video just on mastering the pen tool. Check out this video right over there. It's an important video, very important video. Okay, alright, so let's start creating a path around the subject. So select the pen tool by pressing the shortcut P, do not forget it, P, or simply just click on the pen tool, but shortcuts are very important. Alright, let's zoom in quite a bit and let's start selecting him. And make sure you are a little bit on the inside, because when you soften the edge, you don't want to show the sky or the background, right? So you don't want this halo of blue when you soften the edge. That's why stay a little inside. The idea here is not to stay in line and get the perfection, no. The idea here is to be perfect, but be a little inside, so that we have a good selection instead of a perfect selection. So when you have a perfect one and you try to soften the edge, the halos will show up, and we don't want that. We want it to look good at the end and perfect as well. So stay a little inside. And how do we stay inside? Simple, just stay inside. Just click a point over here, click and drag just like that. Don't stay on the line, stay a little outside. And at any point of time, if you're using a pen tool and you want to adjust the anchor points or the handles, just hold the Control or Command, click and drag. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. As easy as that. Okay. Now we made a mistake, no problem at all. Press the backspace key or the delete key and you'll be back in shape. Then, now what happens is when you delete a point and then when you just try to do it, it creates a separate path. And when that happens, what you can also do is that you can click on this, the last point. And when you click on the last point, it shows you the icon of a link with the pen tool. Just click on that and it will continue with that. Also, if you made a mistake, made a point in a crazy place, you can also press Control or Command Z or Control Alt Z as well, Command Option Z. If you want to go multiple steps, if you want to go just one step, Control or Command Z. But all the time, I usually press Control Alt Z, Command Option Z. All right. Just go ahead, just do this. Now it's gonna take a lot of time. It will. So I already have done the selection and I'll speed it up for you. However, here's what I want to say before I just show you the sped up version. When you reach this point, you see there's a lot of gap in here. You don't have to select the spokes because we will paint them. And we have to paint them, you know why? Because if you look at the spokes, they're so thin, even if we want to select them, the greens in the background will show up, the reds will show up, and we don't want that to happen. So we will paint them. Do not select the spokes, don't worry about it. Select outside of it. So if you're selecting this way, let me show you how's the path's gonna be, and then I'm gonna speed it all up. So the selection is gonna be somewhere like something like this. So you're gonna select somewhere around this edge and then go from here to there, and do not worry about the inside right now. Don't worry about that. Just select from the outside and just select the outside. Now once you select the outside, then you have to create another path and select the insides, like insides of this, okay? Don't worry about the spokes. Just imagine that there are no spokes right now, okay? Now I'm gonna speed it up for you so that you can exactly see how I have created the path. So here's the sped up version. Now as you can see, the path has been made. Now it's time for us to understand it. Let's go to the Paths tab, click on the Paths tab, or if you cannot see it, go to Windows and then make sure Paths is checked. Now let's zoom in and click on the subject path. And also keep in mind that whenever you create a path, you rename it. So when we rename it, it actually saves the path. Alright, so it doesn't erase the path when you create a new path or do something by mistake. Make sure you rename it. Let's have a look at the path. As we discussed before, the objective is to get a good edge. And to do that, we stayed inside. And you don't have to replicate or just select every wrinkle of the cloth or every imperfection. No, you just have to have a good edge and make sure it's on the inside. If you have a look at it, I didn't quite replicate every tiny little detail. If you have a look over there, I didn't have to do that. Just make sure the selection looks good and it's on the inside. All right. Now, if I wanted to make a selection of it, it's very simple. Hold the Control or Command and click on the subject and it would make a selection. But before that, we must not forget that we have to draw the spokes. Alright, so how to draw the spokes? Very simple. I actually deselected that by pressing Ctrl or Command D if you're wondering how that happened. To draw the spokes, we're going to simply use the brush. Let's come back to the layers panel and create a new layer. Alright, now let's zoom into the tires. Tires, wheels, whatever you call it. Let's take a brush and decrease the size to probably depending upon your image. Alright, let's go 3 pixels for this one and zoom in. Make sure the color is black and simply all you have to do, just click once in the end, just like that. Make sure the hardness is 100%. All right, click once in the end, just like this. Opacity and flow also at 100. Hold the Shift key and then click on the other end. Make sure where it is going. Boom, done. And do it with every spoke, just like that. It's gonna take a while, but it will pay off in the end. It looks wonderful. If you selected that, it would be a nightmare. It's impossible to select it, right? So let's go over them. I'm also going to fasten up the process. I already did it and recorded it. So here's the fast forward version. Now the spokes are finally done and we are ready, but before we move forward, I actually did something extra that I wanted to show you. Alright, so other than just drawing the spokes, what I did after we drew the spokes on both the tires, I just increased it to 4 pixels and drew the ends. So clicked once, hold the Shift key, and these ends were already there, so I actually made them as well. Don't do this mistake. If you just click once and hold the Shift key and click on some other place, and if you keep the Shift key held and click somewhere else, it will continue. So make sure you release the Shift key. Okay, so click, hold the Shift key, click, release the Shift key. Do not forget to do that. And I did it with everything, and that's why, let's not save it. We have it over here. So in this one, we have the selection in place. If you go to the paths, we have the subject path in place. We have the spokes in place. Let's name it spoke. Now we are ready to move this to a new background. So let's bring up the selection, go to the paths and hold the Control or Command and click on the subject path. It already makes a very nice selection of it, and then come back to the layers. And then all you have to do, just select the background layer, because in the background layer, we have the image, and click on the mask button. Okay, we have a very nice selection, but it is very harsh. If you have a look at it, it's very harsh. We will make it soft. Don't worry about that. Let's keep a background so that we can see what we are doing. Create a solid color adjustment layer. Click on the adjustment layer icon and choose solid color and choose white. And we're going to put it behind it. Now let's soften the edge. How do we soften the edge? Select the mask. So we are softening the mask. We are not softening the image. Make sure mask is selected. We don't want to soften the image. Select the blur tool, right? And then strength, you can just reduce the strength. 20% is the number that I go usually. And then just blur the edges like that. See, it looks much more natural. And that's why I asked you to stay inside. If it was outside, it would have created a problem. created a problem. Sometimes my tongue slips. Okay. And if your image has hairs, you might have to use channels. You can watch this video on selecting hair. This is one of the best methods to mask hair. Go check that out. All right, so let's keep softening it. If you have already watched it, awesome. I appreciate you. And if you already know it, you're brilliant. Let's do this. You can make the brush bigger and do it at once. You don't have to do it slowly. But in case there are areas which require more softening or more blurring, in that case, it's beneficial to paint a couple of times to get more blurriness. In some other areas, paint less times and leave it sharp. For example, here we have a lot of softness, so we will paint a couple more times. The cycle has to be sharp, so we'll paint less. We could have just simply blurred it out a little bit, but that's not effective because have a look at this. This is very blurry, but this has to be a little sharp. So we will paint a couple more times over here. And that's the advantage of manually blurring it. You get to choose how much to blur. See, this is cycle and this is kind of mechanic stuff. You don't have to blur it so much around the edge. Wonderful. All right, let's zoom out. It looks wonderful. Now let's delete the color fill layer. We don't need it anymore. And let's create a smart object of both of this. Why smart object? See, we don't want to just mess with two layers, spokes differently and this differently. We also don't want to merge it because if we merge it, it will be destructive. We want to have the ability to go back and make changes in the mask if required. And that's why hold the Alt or Option and click on the mask again to show it. And that's why we will convert both of them to smart object collectively. And here's how it works. Hold the Control or Command, select the other one, make sure both of them are selected, and then right click on them and select Convert to Smart Object. And anytime you want to go back, it's just one layer turned into one layer. Just double click on the thumbnail and it goes back, opens up another document and it goes back to the layer and the spokes. Let's close it. We don't need it. And if you want to go back, you can. And we can name this, subject. All right, that is done. Now it's time for us to place this image into another background. All you have to do, just click and drag and drop it into the other document, just like this. And it happens as quickly and easily like that. However, if it doesn't happen for you, let me show you some other method. Let's delete it. Just open them as tabs, just like this. And let's keep it at that. Come to that. Just make sure you cannot see the layers. Just make sure you select it and then drag it and drop it over there. And you're done. Still, if it doesn't happen, still if it doesn't work out, let's bring back to tabs like that. And still, if it doesn't happen, if you're using the latest version of Photoshop or anything after CC 2018, you can copy and paste layers. So let's delete it and come back to this one. Copy, press Ctrl or Command C. Come to this and press Ctrl or Command V. Done. 3 ways of doing the same thing. Now, both of these images have been chosen specifically, intentionally. Have a look at the light. In this image as well, the light is coming a little bit from the back. In the background as well, it's from the back. And that's why they both will match. We have to match the color and stuff, but if I place it over here, look at the light, it's matching. So make sure the light in both of the images, especially the direction of light, is matching. Also have a look at it. It's sunlight in this image. In the background, we obviously have sunlight. So make sure the light is hard or soft in both the images. If in the background we have soft light, the foreground or the subject, we also have to have soft light. Similarly for hard light, all right? So in this case, both have hard light. No problem, we're gonna place it over here. Press Ctrl or Command T and size it, adjust it the way you like it. I like this size, I'm gonna place it over here. Right click on it and click on Distort. I'm gonna make the front a little smaller to give it, an illusion that it's on that direction. If you're understanding what I'm trying to say, if you're not, just do what feels good to you. All right. And that is okay. Hit enter if you're satisfied. And that is looking great. Now let's create the shadow for this one. How do we create the shadow? hold the Control or Command and then click on the thumbnail of the subject. It makes a selection around it. Now let's create a new layer. Make sure the foreground color is black and let's fill the selection in black by pressing Alt backspace or Option Delete. Simple. Press Control or Command D. Now we have the shadow, but we have to place it nicely. How do we place it nicely? Press Control or Command D, and first shadow is always behind, right? Shadow is always below the subject, and bring it below it, and we can name this shadow. And press Control or Command D. Right click on it and choose Distort and bring it down just like that. Okay, now how is the shadow gonna be? Make sure you're following the path of the sun, path of the light from the sun actually. So the sun is throwing light in this direction, just like this. Follow the cursor, follow the cursor. So in this direction, so this is gonna be somewhere like this. Okay, and for the other one, it's coming like that, so it should be here like this. And also follow the curve of the earth. So the earth is like this, so make sure you follow the curve as well of the earth, and the sun, the direction of light is also followed. Make sure that happens. You can make the shadow longer if you want to see what looks good to you, but I'm gonna stay at that. Okay, that is okay for me. And once you're satisfied with the shadow, hit enter. Then just decrease the opacity of the shadow. So let's decrease it to 75. Now let's adjust the shadow. Let's zoom in by pressing Control or Command plus, or what you can also do, hold the space bar and hold the Control or Command, and then you can just drag to the right to zoom in or drag to the left to zoom out. So let's zoom in over here. If you want the back tire to touch, then make sure shadow is selected, and you can use the arrow keys to just touch the tire. So if the back tire is touching the ground, the shadow should also touch the back tire. If you want the cycle or the bicycle to be on air, then you have to leave some gap, probably move it a little apart so that it gives an illusion that it is up in the air. Actually, that's what happens. But I want to keep it touched so that it looks nice, real, natural. But it's totally upon you. What do you want? That's totally your choice, your call. Now, the shadow is very sharp. We need to blur it out. But before we do anything, always to be on the safer side, convert this into a smart object by going to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, hit OK. Then we can blur this area more and this area a little less as it is closer. Okay, so how can I show this? If you have ever seen shadows, I don't know whether you can see shadow of my hand at the back, but if you have ever seen shadows, if it's close, the shadow is going to be sharp. If it's far away, the shadow is going to be very soft, or there's going to be no shadow. And that's how it works. Since this area is far from the head, it's going to have a blurry shadow, and this area on the other hand will have a little sharper shadow than this one. So how do we make that transition? Very simple, go to Filter and then Blur Gallery, Field Blur. Now Field Blur allows you to have multiple points. It already comes to the point. Just move it over here and have the blur at around probably 2 pixels. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to keep it at 2. Let's see how 2 works. 2 doesn't look so much blurry. Let's keep it 4. For just this area, 4 is good. 4 is good. Let's try 6. How is 6? It's not bad as well. And create one more point over here. 6 is too much, I guess. Let's keep it 5. One more point over here. And for this area, as it gradually makes the transition, I'm going to have 15. 15 looks perfect. You can have more if you want to, but too much looks bad. 15 was good. 20, 15, whatever. 15 is great. So let's keep it at 15 or maybe 20. Now you can make that debate, make changes, just play with it, you will understand. Let's keep it 16, hit OK. You can change that later, and that's why this is a smart object. So the advantage of a smart object, if you want to change it, just double click on the blur gallery. It again takes you back to the blur gallery window and you can change that. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't want to change it right now. Now it's time for us to match the subject to that of the background. And how do we do that? First of all, let's create a group of the subject. So hold the Control or Command, select the other one, press Control or Command G, and we can name this subject through. And change the blend mode from pass through to normal. And why is that so? It is because if we create a curves adjustment layer inside of this, okay, and if we make some changes, it will be limited to just the subject. If the blend mode was pass through, if I change it to pass through, it will allow the adjustment layer, the effect of the adjustment layer to pass through. So now if I make a change, have a look, the background is also getting affected. If I change it back to normal, it restricts the passing through of the adjustment layer. You got it? All right. Now let's first of all, we already created a curves adjustment layer. Double click on the icon or the symbol to just bring up the properties, and let's reset that. And we're going to do it. First of all, let's match the shadows. The shadows got to be a little faded. If you have a look at the airplane, the dark areas over here, it's a little faded. So here's how we make it faded, by taking it up like that. Not so much. See, this is not matching. Just a little bit like that. Okay, that is fine. Now we need to create separate curves adjustment layers for the shadow and the subject. Let's minimize this and let's come to the shadow and create a curves adjustment layer, and let's clip it just to shadows. To limit it just to shadows, click on this button. There's no other layer beneath it, so it doesn't really matter, but just to be on the safer side if you happen to add something later. All right. Now shadow is good. It's looking great, but we need to add a little bit of blue to it. So let's go to the blue channel and let's add a little bit blue to the shadow. Not so much. Let's zoom in to have a closer look. Little bit of it. Very little. Okay. Now let's try adding a little red. I don't know whether that's going to look good or not. No, blue is fine. Do we need to darken or brighten it? That's totally upon you. No, that is looking great. We don't need to do anything else. Green. Or if you want to decrease the greens. So you might have to play with these depending upon your image. So if you decrease the greens, it will be a little magenta-ish. Probably a little bit. Okay, very minute differences. And then you can always go to the shadows and decrease the opacity as well. So at this point, the opacity, I think, is showing 100%. Why is it showing 100%? Because we converted that into a smart object after changing the opacity. If you want to change the opacity now, double click on the shadow. Now you can change the opacity over here and save that. Okay. Now let's close it. We don't need it anymore. Opacity seems perfect. If you want to decrease the opacity further, you can do that as well. Like that. I will decrease it. I guess 92 is great. Let's zoom out and have a look. No, probably 100. Now you will go back and forth. This is going to happen. Sometimes it's going to look good, sometimes not. You have to take breaks in between and have a look back at your image. Then let's create a curves adjustment layer for just the subject. Now this is for the overall. You can name this overall. And this is for the shadow curve. Shadow curve. I'm just naming it for your reference. And let's create a curves adjustment layer just for the subject. So subject curve. And if we make any changes to this, it also affects the shadow. We don't want that to happen. So let's clip it. Click on this button and it clips to the subject. Now let's make the shadow a little bit brighter, lighter like that. Dark areas, and let's add a little darkness. Okay, not bad. We want the dark areas of this one to match the dark areas of this one. That's our complete goal over here. It's too dark, not so dark. Play with it and try to match it. You want to have the highlight spot on, so let's bump up the highlights like that. And it's perfect. Have a look at the before and after. So this is the after, this is the before, after, all right? It's matching pretty good. Let's zoom in and you can make changes to this later. Let's try making it darker. No, not much of a difference. It's great. Before, after, looking pretty good. All right. Now have a look at the shadow. What is the color of the shadow in the background? It's bluish, right? So we need to add blue to the shadows. So let's go to the blues and we have to add blues to the shadows like that. And you can also use the hand tool right over there. Click on it and click on the shadow area. Just pick it up like that. This adds blue to it. Now let's zoom out and have a look at it. Okay, now to the highlights we have to add yellow. It's already yellow, but if you want you can add more. And if you add yellows to the highlights, it goes a little greenish. So you have to go to the green and decrease the green from the highlights to add a little magenta color as we have in the background. Okay, that is great. And probably let's add a little bit of red to the highlights and take that away from the shadows. Okay, that is great. Have a look at the before and after. So this is the after, before, not matching at all. See how nicely it's matching right now. So let's go to the RGB. Probably we need to darken it even more, a little bit like that. Okay, close it. It's great. Let's go back. Okay, now it looks fine. We will make changes later if we want to, if we have to. I think now, right now again, it's too red. Let's go to this one again and let's decrease the red. You have to make changes like that again, time and again. Go to the greens, probably let's go to RGB. It's too bright over there on the highlights. Let's take it down. Now it's good. Finally, we are settling with this. Finally, we are settling with this. I'm not going to make any changes right now. Maybe I will. Okay. Done. Done. This is done. Finally, this is done. Okay. Now you're going to have moments like this. Now let's add highlights around the edge. That is very essential because the sun is at the back. So we will have a little bit of rim light around the edge. And that can be done also very easily by creating a levels adjustment layer. Click on the adjustment layer icon and choose levels. And then take the slider on the right to the left. It makes bright things brighter. Okay, bright areas brighter. Just like this. See the amount of highlight it added? Let's minimize that and let's clip it just to the subject. We don't want it on the shadows. Anyway, it will not add on the shadows because it's already dark. Now, we don't want it all over the image, just around the edges. We actually did it in the previous tutorial over there. Okay, make sure the mask is selected, then press Ctrl or Command I. Now, zoom in and with the soft brush, take the brush, make sure the brush is soft and then decrease the flow to somewhere around 4-5% or probably 10% and just paint around the edge with white. And paint on the areas which are in the direction of light. Don't paint on the shadow areas. See what a nice highlight it is. 20. Let's keep it 20. You want to make it even more brighter, just double click on the symbol and you can make it even brighter. Yeah, that is fine. Make sure mask is selected, doesn't paint when the symbol is clicked. Let's add a little shine over there. See, here's a problem. There's a dark area which is selected, so we have to come back to the subject and create a mask and then erase this area off. Take the brush, make sure black is the color and let's erase this area off. The idea here, again, I will repeat, is not to have the perfect edge, but to have an edge which looks good. Let's come back to the mask of the levels and start painting it with white. Press X to toggle between the foreground and the background color and then just paint. Only on the areas which deserve a highlight. For example, this area. Do not paint inside of it. Why? Because it's in shadows. Paint only in the areas which are in the direction of light. Just brighten the inside of it a little bit. Yeah, and we are done. If we zoom out, have a look at it. It looks much more better. Have a look at the before and after, before, after, before, after. Adds that extra highlight. It looks much better. So before, after. We can add even more if you want to. More highlights. If you want even more, you can just increase the levels and add that. Okay, that looks pretty perfect. All right. Now, It's matching, it's looking great. Now it's time for us to add overall effects to the image, such effects which help us blend images together and that we apply collectively, right? So let's collapse this group. Okay, now let's add an effect of the sun. We'll add something. It's just not one effect that you have to add. You can add multiple effects, many effects, as much as you like. And this is just for blending in the images. So let's create a gradient. Click on the adjustment layer icon and let's choose gradient. And we're gonna just single click on the gradient, choose any color which is color to transparent, and on the left hand side let's choose white. On the right hand side also make sure it's some color which is look at the sun. All right, all I wanted to do is to look at the sun. In the middle it is totally white, right? As the light fades away it gets reddish, so you can just sample this color, or you can choose your own color, and that's what we want to replicate. Hit OK. Hit OK again. We are happy with this. We can always change the colors later. Do not worry about that. Change the style to radial and move it right over there. I think I need to change the color to a little more yellowish, or okay, that is great. Hit OK and keep it somewhere around this, and then just increase the size. The size is good, 188. Let's keep it 175. That is great. Hit OK. And let's try different blend modes. Probably screen will look great in this one. And screen is looking great. Now we need to take it away from the dark areas. Just double click on the right hand side of the layer. I'm just playing, right? Just playing. Take the slider of the underlying layer from left to right. It hides the dark areas of the underlying layer from the current layer. So if we take it to the right, see, these were the dark areas in the underlying layer in the background image. These are being removed from the current layer, which is the gradient. And that is fine. But as you can see, it's very harsh. So hold the Alt or Option, click on it, break it, and then separate it. Like that. That's not bad. I kind of like it. Adds that kind of haze to it, and I love it. Alright, hit OK. That is great. Now we don't want it on the subject, so we will just put it under the subject. Okay. Now let's create a copy of the same gradient. Press Ctrl or Command J and put it above the subject. Now we want this to appear also on the dark area so that it acts like a flare. So double click on the right hand side of the layer and bring it back to normal, just like this, and hit OK. And let's go to the properties by double clicking on the symbol, and let's decrease the size. Scale actually. See, it's much more natural. It's coming on the subject as well. So 89 or 100. Let's see what looks good. 100 or let's say 75 as well for this one. Hit OK. It's also looking great. Have a look. So if without this, it's not matching so much. With this, it's also dramatic and it's also matching at the same time. What we can also do is that now that I look at it, some areas are like over brightened. So we can come to the mask of this one, take the brush and just paint these areas in black like that to bring back some of the areas. Zoom out and want to bring back this area. Okay, so without the mask, with the mask, we have some areas back, details. Okay, now let's zoom in and let's have a look at the image. Now as you can see, his nose looks very bright. We need to take care of that. So let's open up the subject. I think it's the levels. So we'll go back to the levels, take the brush, foreground color black, flow 20, that's okay. And we will just paint over here. We don't want so much of a brightness at that. Okay, now we think that the subject is not bright enough. So here's what we do. We come back to the subject curve, click on the symbol, bring up the properties. We brighten it up a little bit according to the image. Like that. Yep. And now let's zoom out and now let's have a look at it. I think it's too colorful. It has gone very colorful. So let's create a hue saturation adjustment layer and let's decrease the saturation. All right. -27. I like to type in numbers. I don't know why, but I love to do that. As you can see, the nose and stuff is very bright. So we will go back to the levels. Let's turn it off. Let's see how that looks. It's okay. But on the face, it's too bright. Let's go to the mask and let's paint this area in black. Okay, that is great. Press Ctrl or Command 0 to fit the canvas to the screen. And we are pretty much done. Now, in case you want to add more effects, we can do that as well. You can add any effect that you like. I'm gonna go ahead and choose color lookup and just click on anyone, and using the scroll of the mouse, scroll and see which one looks great. Let's just choose probably this one. This looks fine, wonderful, but it looks bad on the dark area. So here's what we do. Double click on the right hand side of the layer. Do the same thing, hold the Alt or Option, just break it like that. Hit OK. Have a look, before, after, like adds a kind of brightness. You can add one more curves adjustment layer, you know, you can make it dark and like faded like that. It looks wonderful as well. Probably add a little red in the highlights, take it away in the shadows. Now let's keep it normal. Normal is looking great. And there we go. If you also want to create lens flare, let's do that as well. By holding Ctrl Alt Shift E, let's create a stamp visible layer. If you're using a Mac, that would be Command Option Shift and E. This creates a stamp visible layer because lens flare just doesn't work on a blank layer. Now let's go to Filter, Render, and then lens flare. Where is that? There it is. You can place it at the sun like that. And you can choose any one that you like. This one. Let's choose 105 and let's place it properly right over there and hit OK. Now that renders the lens flare, but I cannot edit it. However, there's one more method. The method is this. Just delete this layer. We don't need that anymore. Let's create a black layer. So create a new layer and fill this with black. Make sure the foreground color is black. Press Alt Backspace. Now simply go to Filter and choose lens flare. It will repeat the same with the same settings. And now it just does that. Change the blend mode to screen. The advantage of having it on a separate layer is that you can fade it out if you want to, decrease the opacity, or probably if you can also blur it out. So let's keep it at 65 and let's zoom in. You can blur it out if you want to. You can choose the blur tool and simply just blur it just like that. Or you can just also go to Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian blur and apply some blur if you want to. 4 pixels, 6 pixels, whatever you like. 11 pixels, okay. Let's go 26. 9 pixels, that's fine. Hit OK if you're satisfied. And then you can also create a mask. Click on the mask button, take the brush, and you can also erase the areas that you don't like. Float 20% or 10%. And let's just erase the areas that you don't like and just erase these areas. And you get the idea. Just some areas that you don't like so much, you can just erase the corners. And there you go. And here is the final result. I just worked with it a little bit and here's the final result. So that's how to perform a very simple photo manipulation and create this composite in Photoshop. I hope you try it. The idea and the concept remains the same. Make sure the selection is good. Doesn't have to be perfect. Make sure the edges look good when placed on a new background. If you go after perfection, if you go and create the path on the line, it might result in halos when you soften it. So make sure you stay inside and make sure the edges look good. Doesn't have to be perfect. Secondly, when you place it, it should match. You can match it using curves, levels, whatever you like. Just match it. Also, you can create shadows. There are lots of ways of creating shadows. You can just simply paint with a brush. In this case, we simply held the Control or Command, clicked on the subject, made a selection on a new layer, filled that with black, and then adjusted it. If that was a soft light, you won't have so detailed shadow because this is sun and this has hard light. That's why we created a hard shadow. Otherwise, we just simply would have just taken a brush and just created a soft shadow. It would have been simple. In this case also, it's simple because we already had that structure. And then you can add some blending effects to blend the images together. In this case, we added the gradient, we added a color lookup table, curves, lens flare, and all of that. And that's pretty much it. It's very simple. Make a selection, place it, match it, blending effects, done. So that's all for this video. I hope this video helped you, and if it did, make sure to give us a like, and also do not forget to subscribe, and not just subscribe. Ring the bell so that you, my friend, don't miss a thing. Thanks to all these nice people for helping keep PiXimperfect free for everybody forever by supporting us on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.